guys, welcome back. Today we are going to start talking about Genestealer Cults. Prepare yourself, for you are about to learn the secrets of a vile alien creed. The Genestealer curse is a parasitic infection of mind, body, and soul that eats away at the heart of the Imperium. And this book helps you represent it on the battlefield, gathering your collection of Genestealer Cults Citadel miniatures into an all-conquering force of insurrectionists. On the darkly glorious day of a Genestealer Cults uprising, its warriors are already 10 steps ahead of the enemy. Fast-moving saboteurs have shattered the supply lines of those who would oppose them. Hidden agents have assassinated key commanders, and routes of escape have been cut off by demolition crews and industrial mining teams. The foe finds their ammunition crates empty, their fuel reserves dry, their transportation craft hijacked, and their supporting fleet holed and listening in orbit. When the cult unleashes the abhorrent alien monstrosities that act as its shock troops, the enemy is already surrounded, stranded, and ripe for a slaughter long planned. Using a Genestealer Cult's army in battle is a wargaming experience like no other, and presents an exciting challenge for veterans and newcomers alike. Their ability to ambush the enemy means they can appear from nowhere and wreak havoc, whether through firepower or swift assault. With a mix of fervent worshippers, industrial machinery repurposed for war, heavy-hitting Xenos hybrids, and cunning leaders with specialist abilities, all guided by a monstrous patriarch, there are 100 ways to secure victory. The triumph of the xenoform over the works of man is inevitable. The galaxy cannot contain both indefinitely, for one feeds upon the other and cannot be sated. Only by joining with the alien lords, by becoming them, can mankind survive. Succumb, yield, admit your weakness, and accept the Genestealer's kiss. Only then will you be strong and take your true place among the stars. Worshippers of the Xenos. From the dark depths and shadowy streets emerge the Genestealer cultists, malformed figures united by a sinister worship of inscrutable star-born entities. Secretive, stealthy, and utterly malignant, they are the canker growing unseen in the hidden spaces of the Imperium. Humanity is beset on all fronts by Xenos raiders and the nightmarish forces of chaos. Billions of lives are sacrificed upon the altar of war every day to keep the enemy at bay. Yet the most insidious threat to mankind's survival may already have seeped into the bloodstream of the Imperium. Embedded into the infrastructure of countless seemingly loyal worlds, the Genestealer cults bide their time, spreading tendrils of corruption through the native population until they are ready to begin their bloody insurrections. Once unleashed, They rise up in a surging tide, armed with stolen Imperial weaponry and crude industrial tools turned to horrific purposes. When the Imperium first encountered Genestealers upon the moons of Ymgarl, they thought them to be a unique species. In fact, as the Ordo Xenos discovered after a harrowing series of investigations, they are the vanguard organisms that the Tyranid hive fleets seed before them to create disunity and fear in their path. Resilient and possessed of razor-sharp claws that can carve through warplate, Genestealers are used in open battle by the hive fleets as shock troops. When infiltrating Imperial space, however, the Genestealers instead show their capacity for stealth and cunning. Slinking and creeping, stalking and murdering in silence, solitary Genestealers stow away on spacecraft and spread along space lanes like a virus. In theory, it only takes one Genestealer successfully slipping aboard a cargo freighter and reaching a populated world to spell the doom of an entire sector. There are legends in the Imperium of titanic space hulks infested with tens of thousands of these creatures. Such a nest could bring utter catastrophe to swaths of the Imperium. Should a Genestealer reach a suitable world, its dark work begins in earnest. In the space of a few years, hundreds of civilians will have been abducted by the creature and infected with Tyranid genetic structures. In time, the infected give birth to vile hybrids of Xenos and human. Those descended from the first victims are unmistakably alien, with large domed heads and razor-sharp talons. As the corruption continues to spread, subsequent generations are born who can pass as human and are able to blend in with the wider population. And even Imperial organizations such as the Adeptus Arbites, the Munitorum, and the Astra Militarum. As the cult's numbers grow, more specialized hybrids are created to serve the Genestealer, now worshipped as the Patriarch. Maguses are psychically gifted individuals tainted by the Patriarch's will, tasked with converting key targets within the planet's government and military leadership. The hybrid masses are organized and led by primuses, generals and ambush specialists responsible for coordinating the eventual uprising. Nexuses provide tactical support to their primuses' strategic plans, their command of detail and contingency second to none. Sanctuses act as assassins, and locuses as bodyguards, even as Clamafuses preach the word of the cult and foil enemy communications. Atalan jackals speed into battle upon dirt cycles and wolf quads, harrying the enemy flanks, whilst pure-strain Genestealers and aberrant monstrosities, sometimes bolstered by the gene alchemists known as biophaguses, act as shock troops. Whether it takes a handful of months or many years, eventually the cult will go on the warpath. Only then will the Patriarch send the synaptic order to rise up and drown the planet in blood. When the creature's minions receive the psychic command to begin the insurrection, the hybrids arm themselves with purloined military gear and mining tools, and surge forth from their hidden lairs in massed tides. Guided by the cunning will of their war leaders, they strike first at key tactical locations like communications outposts, spaceports, and munition yards. Stripped of its defenses and ability to call for help, the planet is left ripe for conquest. In a frenzy of brutal violence, the cultist uprising falls upon those enemies who pose the greatest threat to the cult's agenda. Bones are shattered by ear-bursting blasts from seismic cannons. Weaponized rock drills are thrust into vulnerable flesh in a horrifying eruption of gore, and mining charges are used as makeshift grenades. The banners and sigils of the cult are unveiled at last. Standards and worm-formed totems held high by acolyte icon wards, whose presence inspires the broodkin to new heights of savage fervor. During the many long years of preparation for this moment, the cult will have stolen and sequestered many vehicles to aid it in its murderous rampage. Rugged Goliath trucks and rock grinders, a common sight in mines and manufactorums all across the Imperium, are turned to violent purpose. Mounted with a range of heavy armaments, Goliath trucks rush broods of acolytes to the front lines, carving a path across even the most rugged of terrain and releasing an unceasing hail of bullets to tear through enemy infantry. Rock grinders simply crash into the center of the foe's formations, reaping a hideous toll as their saw-toothed drill-dozer blades grind screaming bodies into bloody paste. Should the threat of enemy armor emerge, the cult will respond by deploying stolen Lehman Russ tanks and Sentinel walkers, piloted by neophyte hybrids who laid hidden in the ranks of human armies for decades. Utterly loyal to the Patriarch, they turn their guns on their former comrades without a second thought. The psychological impact of this sudden betrayal is a weapon in itself. All too often the stimulus for this uprising is the approach of a tyrannid biofleet, those the cult sees as saviors from above. As the hive fleet vomits its swarms of warrior organisms into the stricken world's atmosphere, the cultists sing rapturous prayers to their deliverers. Even as the Tyranids exterminate and devour every source of biomass on the planet, still the cultists hold faith in their corrupted hearts that these voracious aliens will elevate the faithful, helping them to transcend their mortal weaknesses. Eagerly they await the blessed oneness of form and purpose they have been promised. For a while, at least, the Tyranids and the Patriarch's brood fight as one, the hive mind's control ensuring that the cult is not preyed upon. Maguses hurl illusions that warp and tear the minds of the enemy, turning them upon each other with sadistic pleasure. The Patriarch's generals marshal their forces with consummate skill, spending their warriors' lives by the thousands to open a path for the Tyranid assault. In this final exalted hour, the Patriarch himself enters the fray, and his faithful are sent into a zealous frenzy as their prophet rips the unworthy apart with razored claws and shredding fangs. As soon as the last of the defenders is overrun by this tide of chitin and scything claws, the hive mind subsumes the Patriarch into its greater consciousness. It becomes merely another organism in the Tyranid swarm, the psychic brood mind that once united its cult, severed in an instant. In an awful moment of realization, the cultists at last understand the fell truth. Those same creatures from beyond the stars that they once worshipped as gods are revealed as their doom incarnate, for to the Tyranids, all flesh is much the same. The humble soul shall inherit the stars. Only he sees the glory in spurning individual power to become one of many. Let the fool and the heathen scrabble in the embers of war for personal gain. We shall rise above the flames as a flock of phoenixes reborn, a host of angels recast in the image of the true rulers of this galaxy. A panoply of gods to whom nothing is considered beyond our reach. Magus incumbent, Darigau Threndact. A cult uprising in full swing is a tide of discolored flesh and chitinous armor crashing upon the last bulwarks of imperial civilization. Those who stand their ground will be destroyed, buried under the bodies of the patriarch's faithful before the final day of reckoning. The Genestealer Curse. Pure strain gene stealers propagate with a hideous alien fecundity, infecting generations of imperial prey until the time is right to strike. Each new batch of offspring seems more human than the last, as the Xenos germ seed is seemingly diluted, but within the shape of the beast lurks unchanged. At the culmination of the curse's cycle, alien nightmares are born anew. As with all their void-born kind, the Genestealer is inhumanly patient, able to subsist on very little sustenance, and to wait for decades if necessary before making its move. When a Genestealer reaches a world ripe for infection, it will immediately go into hiding, clambering into dark and forgotten places, and lurking unseen as it prepares to spread its influence. Once it is certain of being able to acquire victims whilst still remaining undetected, it will stalk the fringes of society in search of prey, emerging only on the blackest of nights to snatch away the unwary with its steel-hard, muscular limbs. Those who fall prey to the Genestealer's silent ambushes are not torn apart for later consumption, as with most victims of the Tyranid race. Instead, they are put in thrall by its hypnotic gaze. Selected victims are then impregnated with a portion of the creature's own genetic pattern, delivered under the skin via a ribbed tube called an ovipositor. This process is known in the cult as the Genestealer's kiss. Though it bestows a portion of the Xenos entity's strength and longevity, this implantation is as cold and uncaring as a blade in the back. The resultant parasitism alters the body until the Xenos taint runs throughout. It also alters the mind, forcing the victim to revere the Genestealer as a messianic figure, the idol of an obsessive new religion. Whenever a Genestealer implants a victim, it condemns their bloodline forever. Their hybrid offspring are grotesque and misshapen creatures who are as varied in form as they are hideous to behold. Certain features are common, such as bulbous craniums and snarling, needle-toothed maws, a pair of extra limbs ending in viciously sharp claws, truncated tail spikes, and mottled purplish skin. These initial hybrids are known as the first generation. The Genestealer and its hybrids of the first generation will then hypnotize new victims who join the cult and later sire young in their turn. This gives rise to the second generation. These new creatures are hunched and stooped, not in the manner of the old or infirm, but more like pressured springs that are ready to explode into sudden movement. These hybrids may have 5 or even 6 limbs, but their eyes and mouths are like those of their human parent, and they can make themselves understood in low Gothic. Though their minds are still so alien that they defy analysis, the second generation is sapient enough to understand its host society. Some are even put to work in the industrial subcultures of their kin, their uncanny strength and resilience allowing them to use heavy mining tools and explosives with far more ease than a human operator. As each cycle passes and new breeding stock is brought into the fold, the hybrid offspring evince fewer mutations. The third generation is typified by an upright stance, though they appear human from a distance. On closer inspection, they have heavily ridged heads, mauve to violet skin, and may hide a vestigial limb under their clothes. By the fourth generation, the scions of the cult can pass for human, inveigling themselves into positions of power to further their agenda. Leaders of uncanny influence emerge within the hierarchy, psychic agents and charismatic demagogues whose rhetoric inflames the subculture further. Fourth generation cultists can breed true. They do not give birth to untainted humans, but instead to pure strain genestealers, just as alien as the original progenitor. The parents of these fifth-generation creatures see them not as the hideous, hissing changelings they truly are, but as soft-skinned infants, innocent and sweet. They do everything they can to protect them, even giving their own lives if necessary. By this point, the curse's hold is complete, and the brood cycle begins anew. The Genestealer at the heart of the cult, known as the Patriarch, has an inherent control over every one of these minions, no matter the generation. The Patriarch unites them with a subtle alteration of the psyche, a subconscious link known as the brood mind. It is this shared sentience that makes the cult so tight-knit and loyal, that gives them uncanny strength and speed in battle, and that seeks to undermine the spiritual sanctity of mankind. Such cults have thrived in the dark corners of the Imperium longer than any suspect. On those occasions when they rise up in open rebellion, they can capsize a planet's defenses in hours. The cultists of these grand insurgencies have spent their whole lives preparing for the day of the final conquest. Generation after generation have been bred in secrecy, cycle after cycle bearing nauseating fruit. The infected have spread the curse to others, and to their children, who in turn have infected more. Like a living virus, they breed exponentially, their numbers swelling until the rulers of the underworld are strong enough to seize the entire host planet. Though the later generations of each cycle have the appearance of common men, inside they are Xenos through and through. Their allegiance is owed only to the organisms that brought the Genestealer curse to their world and the hybrids of their hidden kindred. Their patriarch, star-born and inhuman, squats at the center of a web of influence that expands until it covers the entire world. Every soul in the cult is obedient to this repulsive repulsive creature and would give their lives to save him. Once the cult is fully mature, it seeks to propagate once more. Its leaders carefully send selected pure strains on long journeys to locate new feeding grounds, there to begin the whole hellish process again. The creation of a cult. The genesis of a Genestealer cult is a strange and disturbing process. Though it obeys a loosely cyclical structure, many offshoots and bastardizations occur, resulting in a spectrum of anatomies from the outwardly wholesome to the truly bizarre. All members of this tainted family tree, even the non-hybrid members known as brood brothers, remain fiercely loyal to one another, bound as one by the Gestalt brood mind. The most powerful weapon of the Genestealer cult is secrecy. From the moment the infection vector arrives to the grand uprising itself, the faithful stick to the shadows. Those elements that emerge into the light of everyday life wear a mask of mundanity. Outwardly, the cultists worship the same deity as the host civilization, albeit a strange variant thereof. They teach extreme modesty, keeping their mutations hidden under robes and industrial clothing. Latter generation hybrids work tirelessly, respecting the old and cherishing the young. Only on the day of reckoning is the awful truth of their existence revealed. So it begins with the infection vector arriving on the planet, which gives rise to the Patriarch. Genestealers arrive in a locality and go into hiding. The first Genestealer to infect a native life form will evolve into the Patriarch, and this is inserted into the indigenous populace, which gives birth to the first generation. The firstborn offspring of the infected native creatures are early generation Genestealer hybrids, known as acolytes. It also creates the brood brothers. Those of the Astra Militarum who are caught under the cult's hypnotic spell join the ranks of the brood brothers. Though outwardly soldiers of the Imperium, they are devoted only to the cult. It also creates the second generation. The first generation hybrids breed with indigenous humanoids to produce second generation hybrids, also known as acolytes. They, in turn, create the Acolyte Icon Ward. The most favored of the acolytes is entrusted with the cult's sacred icon, becoming a focus for its kin's devotion. We have the third generation. Second generation hybrids breed with indoctrinated captives, producing third generation hybrids who are more like the parasitized gene stock in appearance. And they create the Kellermorph. Under certain conditions, the pistol-wielding Kellermorph will rise from the third generation to become a cult hero. Then the fourth generation. The process is repeated once more. Both third and fourth generation cultists, known as neophyte hybrids, can usually pass for human in low light. And they capture vehicles to become cult vehicles. They also are the source of outriders. The bike-mounted scouts, known as Atalan Jackals, are neophytes. They roam far and wide in search of new populations to infect and exploit. Typically, they are led by a Jackal Alphys, who fulfills the triple roles of sniper, comms expert, and spy. The 4th generation also produces the Maguses. Sometimes a 4th generation hybrid will manifest psychic abilities and become a Magus. Such individuals are often accompanied by strange Xenos familiars. Lastly, the 4th generation leads to cult operatives. The specialist operatives spawned during a brood cycle are many and varied. Amongst them is the Clamavus, a herald of the new order to come, who specializes in disrupting the information of the cult's enemies and propagating the cult creed in its place. The Biophagus, whose expertise is in artificially melding the xenoform gene pattern with that of the host, creates all manner of vile shock troops for the cultists' day of ascension. The Sanctus, armed with envenomed blades and a rifle that fires serum-coated darts, acts as their gene sect's foremost assassin, killing key figures before slipping away into the night. The Locus serves as the bodyguard of their gene sect's leaders, exploding into action whenever their masters are threatened. And then we have the 5th generation. 4th generation hybrids breed with the local populace, birthing pure strain genestealers, seen as beautiful infants by their parents. These renew the cycle of infection, and they in turn become the vector of new infestation. The Tyranid approach triggers an uprising, which leads to hybrid metamorphs. As the day of the uprising grows near, the cult spawns xenoforms built for war alone. The limbs of these hybrid metamorphs echo the weapons of the Tyranid swarm. And then lastly, we have aberrants. Aberrants may occur at various points in the brood cycle as a result of crossbreeding, dark experiments, warp storms, or something even stranger. And they in turn lead to the abominant. The most promising of the aberrants is given a portion of the Patriarch's own gene stuff, swelling and mutating, until it becomes a champion of its hideous kind. And that is where we are going to stop the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, sharing it, and subscribing. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.